Shalom. Welcome to Through the Book of Enoch, Lesson 2. Lesson 3. We are beginning in chapter 7, verse 1. We actually covered chapter 7, verse 1, but I want to last lesson, but I want to cover it again, just more briefly. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives. It's talking here about the fallen angels that we talked about in chapter 6. It says, all the others together with them took unto them wives from all, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go in unto them and to defile themselves with them, and they taught them, their wives, sorcery and spellbinding and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And as we talked about last week, the Zohar talks about the fact that these fallen angels, Shemichazah or Uzzah and Azazel, taught men sorcery, even at a later time, to those who knew the secret of how to contact them in their abode where they're imprisoned, and knew how to contact them and obtain information and learn sorcery from them. And particularly he mentions Balaam, and that's significant because both 2 Peter and Jude speak of the error of Balaam in connection with these fallen angels, and connect it with a last days teaching which tries to turn grace into perversion and liberty into bondage. Okay. Verse 2, and they became pregnant, and they bore great giants, whose height was 3,000 cubits, and there was not born upon the earth children of their strength. Now this reference to 3,000 cubits is very controversial. Those who attack the book of Enoch will frequently cite this reference to 3,000 cubits, and I don't know what it works out if you do the conversion, but it's too large to be really feasible. And so those, or at least seem to be feasible. And so they'll argue that the book of Enoch is impossible, these inflated numbers are ridiculous, and therefore it never happened. But the problem is that we have lost the original Hebrew of the book of Enoch. We don't have it. And so when we say 3,000 cubits, we're talking about a translation that exists in Aramaic and in Greek and in Ethiopic, but not in the original Hebrew. And so we don't know what this word that gets translated cubits was in the original language, nor what it originally meant. In other words, whatever unit of measure was being referred to, it may not, it was a pre-flood unit of measurement, which means that it probably wasn't equivalent to the units of measurements that we see after the flood. So there's a word that somebody somewhere along the way translated. They may not have even known what the length was, and so what the unit of length was, and so they translate cubits. Even the word cubit has referred to a variety of different lengths over a period of time that were a cubit. They're not the same length. There's an Egyptian cubit, or Roman cubit, and so on. All right. So we don't know how big these, how much 3,000 cubits were. All we know is that it was huge. Okay. They were huge. 3, they were devouring all the produce of men, and when men could no longer supply them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. So the offspring of the fallen angels, they were huge. They had a huge appetite, and they consumed all the produce that man could produce, and they were still hungry, and so in their hunger they started even consuming men. So, you were trying to desperately feed them as best you could, because if you didn't feed them enough, they'd eat you. Verse 5, and they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, because these animals were not given to be eaten until after the flood in Genesis chapter 9. So here, they were sinning against beasts and reptiles and fish. They were eating animals that were not on the menu yet. And they were, as well as eating men, as it already indicated. And they were drinking the blood, which is a really big no-no in the Torah, in Leviticus 17:11 through 12, and in Genesis chapter 9, verse 4, as part of the covenant with Noah. Even the blood was forbidden, and we also see references to this in Acts 15, Acts 21. This not consuming blood, and in 1 Enoch chapter 98, verse 11. So they were consuming blood. When the earth laid accusation against the Torahless ones, some concerning all the things that were being done upon it. Now the word there is the Enomian ones. They were Enomian. Some have tried to characterize the book of Torah as, the book of Enoch, as not being concerned very much with the Torah and Torah observance. It has even been falsely presented that the book of Enoch was characteristic of a Jewish cult that was not tied to the Torah and didn't highly regard the Torah or regard the Torah at all. That's simply not true, and here there are many references to Torah and Torah observance in the book of Enoch that we will talk about as we continue through. But here, this word in the Greek translation is anomon, which is literally nomon or nomos, meaning in the Greek word for Torah, with the Greek prefix a, which means there is not or without, prefixed to it. So in the Greek version of 1 Enoch, it's Torahlessness, or the Torahless ones, concerning all things that were done upon it. So this was a threat to Torah. Chapter 8, verse 1. And Asael taught men to make swords of iron, and knives, and shields, and breastplates of brass, and made known to them the metals that are excavated from the earth, and the art of making gold, and concerning silver, and bracelets, and ornaments, and concerning antimony, and eyeshadow, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness and being wicked, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. So we're kind of backing up a little bit, and we're telling what Asael taught men, particularly. And there's some question in verse 1 whether this is a different angel, a different fallen angel, or the same one that we read about in the list that was Asael, because in the Greek it's Asael. I don't think the Aramaic has survived, but the Greek has Asael for this word. The Ethiopic has Azazel. So the question then arises: is Azazel and Asael the same angel, or is Azazel a different fallen angel? Either one of the ones that wasn't named, or one of the ones that didn't fall with them, but was from this previous batch of fallen angels. At any rate, and Asael taught men to make swords of stone and knives. So this guy, he taught warfare and technology related to warfare, among other things, and metallurgy, as well as technology, if you will, of cosmetics that made women look more enticing. Shemi Chazah taught spellbinding in verse 3. Shemi Chazah taught spellbinding and root cutting. Hermione, the loosing of spells. So Shemi Chazah was the one that was really the teacher of sorcery. And we talked about that last week, and how the Zohar talks about that as well, as far as Uzzah and Azazel both as teachers of sorcery. Okay. by the way, since Azazel, or Asael, was teaching to make swords of iron and knives and shields and breastplates of brass, it makes sense that he was also, there was a reason that he was manufacturing weapons. So there appears that there was warfare that was starting to take place, and it also implies that these guys were in positions of leadership, which parallels what the book of Jasher says about these fallen angels, because he calls them judges and rulers. Clearly, these fallen angels became judges and rulers among them. And this may explain why the people came to Enoch and made him a king, a counter-ruler, if you will. Baruch El taught signs of thunders, Kokovel the constellations of the stars, Zikael the signs of lightning, Artakif the signs of the earth, Shimshael the signs of the sun, and Sahariel the signs of the moon, and they all began to reveal these secrets to their wives. Now, constellations is literally signs of stars in the Aramaic. So these guys taught different things, different secrets from the heavens that were tied to their names, to their functions. This implies that perhaps they weren't all-knowing, though they weren't all-knowing, but that each one, though limited in his scope of knowledge, knew certain things that they were able to bring to the table because of their job and their function in the heavenlies before they fell. Verse 4, and because part of mankind was perishing from the earth, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. Now, they were perishing for two reasons. They were perishing partly because they were being eaten by the giants. They were also perishing because there was warfare that was taking place, the weapons that were being built. Obviously, there was a reason for the weapons, and that reason was war. So we get now to chapter 9. And before we get to chapter 9, we should probably look back over the parallel to this in the Torah. And in Genesis chapter 6. Verse 1, it came to pass when the men began to marry on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, whomsoever they chose. And Yahweh said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for that he is flesh, therefore shall his days be 120 years. And the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of Elohim came unto the daughters of men, and they were born children to them, the same were the mighty men that were of old, the men of renown. And Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was evil continually. And it repented Yahweh that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And Yahweh said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing and the fowl of the air, for it repents me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of Yahweh. Now let's go back to our text of Enoch. Continuing back into chapter 9, and something interesting happens in chapter 9. In chapter 9, the outcry from man on the earth, because they're being eaten, because of the warfare, because they are dying, they're being killed, they cry out for vengeance, and they starts in verse 9. We are transported to the heavens, if you will, and 4 of the archangels are in the heavens. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gavriel looked down from the sanctuary of heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all the earth was filled with Torahlessness. Here is that same word again, the Aramaic has Rasha, which is wickedness. But the Greek has Enoman, which is without Torah or Torahlessness, and violence, so that sin was being wrought upon it. Now, there's different sins that were being wrought upon it. We can see one of those sins was that the fallen angels took human form without permission. They then married and copulated with women without permission. They also began teaching them and teaching mankind information that should not have been shared with mankind. And the result of this sin was at the same time this race of giants that were being born that were also killing men. And so we get to verse 2, and hearing it, the four went and said among themselves that the voice and the cry in the perishing of the sons of the earth reaches to the gates of heaven. And now to you, the set apart ones of heaven, the souls of men make their suit and say, bring our cause before the Most High. So the prayers of men first come to these angels. And Raphael and Michael said to the Master of the ages, our great Master, you are the Master of the ages, Master of masters, Elohi of Elohim, King of kings, and Elohim of the ages. The throne of your glory stands unto all the generations of ages, and your name set apart and glorious and blessed unto all the ages. You have made all things, and you have power over all things, and all things are naked and open in your sight, and you see all things, and nothing can hide itself from you. Therefore, you already know what we're going to tell you. We're not going to tell you anything you don't already know. We know that you know about this. We know that you're seeing it. Okay, so verse 6, you see what Azazel has done, who has taught all unrighteousness on the earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which are preserved in heaven, which men were practicing. So, to whom you have given authority to be king over his associates. And they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has therefore been filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now, behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suit to the gates of heaven. And their lamentations have ascended and cannot cease because of the Torahless deeds. Again, same Greek term, from the same Greek term, anomia, in the Greek version, which are wrought on the earth. And you know all things before they come to pass, and you see these things, and you do suffer them or allow them. You're allowing this to happen, and you do not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these things. So they're, they've been waiting around, and they've been hearing this outcry, and then they go to Elohim and they say, well, yeah, we know you're seeing this happen, and you hear this outcry too, but you haven't told us what we should do about it. Are you going to tell us, give us some instructions? Then said the Most High, the set apart and great one, spoke, and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, i.e. Noah, and said to him, go to Noah and tell him in my name, hide yourself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is on it. And now instruct the righteous man that he may escape, and the son of Lamech to preserve his soul to life, and to escape forever. And from him there will be planted a plant, and his seed may be preserved for all generations of this world. We read about this plant in Romans chapter 11, the olive tree prophecy, and Wisdom 14:6, in 1 Enoch 10:16 and 65:12. All right, very important passage you might want to make note of there about the plant here. And again, before we get on to what Yahweh says to Raphael, I want to pause here and take a moment to discuss the fact that this portion of the book of Enoch testifies to the great antiquity of this book. The reason I say that is because, and remember, the book of Enoch is, if it's authentic, what it claims to be, is the oldest book on earth. Older than any part of the Bible. The evidence of this is found in some ancient clay tablets, and the Babylonian flood story as found in the ancient clay tablets that give the Babylonian flood story and the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh. And that's our next handout, which is Ancient Clay Tablets Verify the Extreme Antiquity of the Book of Enoch. The Babylonian flood story, which these tablets date back to the time of Abraham, says, "There was Anu, lord of firmament, their father and warrior Enil, their counselor Ninurta the helper, and Inugi watcher over canals. And with them also was Ea." So you have these four false gods, and they're with another false god called Ea, E-A, obviously a derivative of Yah. In those days, the world teemed, the people multiplied, and the world bellowed like a wild bull, and the great God was aroused by the clamor. Enlil heard the clamor, and he said to the gods in council, "The uproar of mankind is intolerable, and sleep is no longer possible by reason of the babel." So the gods in their hearts were moved to let loose the deluge. Okay? Now, in the Babylonian flood story, the gods are angry because people are making too much noise, and they can't sleep. So they go then to Ea. They said, "But my lord Ea warned me in a dream, build a boat. These are the measurements of the bark." And they take up onto the boat the seed of all living creatures. For 6 days and 6 nights the wind blew, torrent and tempest and flood overwhelmed the world. On the mountain of Nasir the boat held fast. I loosed a dove and let her go. She fled away, and but finding no resting place to return, then I loosed a swallow, and she flew away, but finding a resting place she returned. I loosed a raven, and she saw that the waters had returned. She ate, and she flew around. She cawed, and she did not come back. I made a sacrifice. Okay, so we see here a lot of parallels between the Babylonian flood story and the biblical flood story. This is not because the biblical flood story is false or of pagan origin, but rather because the Babylonian flood story is imitating the true flood story of Noah. But what's really important here is that the Babylonian flood story, which dates back to the time, at least to the time of Abraham on these clay tablets, bears a closer parallel to the flood story as recorded in the book of Enoch than it does to the flood story in the book of Genesis. In both accounts, an individual was warned to build an ark, talking about Genesis. In both accounts, it's mentioned that man had multiplied on the earth. In both accounts, the individual was told the dimensions to build the ark, or the boat. Both accounts have the formula that the rain lasted X days and X nights. Both accounts have the ark or the boat coming to rest on a mountain. Both accounts have birds sent out to find dry land. Both accounts have the ark builder making a sacrifice after exiting the vessel. So there's definitely a very close relationship between these two flood stories as found in Genesis and as found in the clay tablets. But there's some important parallels that have gone unnoticed between the flood accounts of these clay tablets and the flood account in the book of Enoch. First of all, the Genesis account, the flood occurs because, quote, Elohim saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, Genesis 6:5. But in the Babylonian flood story it occurs because, quote, Enlil heard the clamor, and he said to the gods in council, the uproar of mankind is intolerable, and sleep is no longer possible by reason of the Babel. It's a clear distinction between the two stories, but the book of Enoch says, in 1 Enoch 8:4, part of mankind was perishing from the earth. They cried, and their cry went up to heaven. And we read then in chapter 9, not only that their cry went up to heaven, but then in chapter 9, verse 2, and hearing it, the four went and said among themselves, that the voice and cry in the perishing of the sons of earth reaches to the gates of heaven. So only in the clay tablets and in the book of Enoch is there a cry from men upon earth that reaches heaven. Now there is a big difference. In the Babylonian version, the gods are irritated that they can't sleep because of it, and in the book of Enoch, it's not false gods but angels that are concerned that they are hearing it, but they haven't really gotten any instructions from Elohim as to what to do about it. So there's that parallel. In the Babylonian account, the four false gods have Ea with them, and they hear the clamor, and Enlil proposes the idea of a flood and gets agreement, but Ea sympathizes with man and warns the Babylonian Noah to build an ark. The Babylonian Noah is a guy named Utnapishtim, I think it's pronounced. Anyway, in the Enochian account, the four angels, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, and Michael, hear the cry, and then they consult with Yahweh, who proposes the flood, and they send Uriel to Noah to warn him to build an ark. You can see the parallel here. Clearly, the Enoch account, rather than Genesis account, is the source for the Babylonian flood story. Moreover, the Babylonian flood story is part of a much longer work called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which records the exploits of its hero, Gilgamesh, in his failed search for eternal life. Now, it's interesting that amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, there is a book called the Book of Giants, which is closely related to the Book of Enoch and talks about the fallen angels. And one of the fallen angels that it speaks of is it talks about the giants, the sons of the fallen angels, and one of the ones that it names by name is Gilgamesh. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh describes Gilgamesh as part man, part god. It says, when the gods created Gilgamesh, they gave him a perfect body. Shamash, the glorious sun, endowed him with beauty. That's important. Shamash, the sun, endowed him with beauty. Adad, the god of the storm, endowed him with courage. The great gods made his beauty perfect, surpassing all others. 2/3 they made him god, and 1/3 man. The book of Enoch, one of the fallen angels that's a father of the giant is Shemeshel, the son, literally son, S-U-N of El. And Gilgamesh is named as one of the sons of the fallen angels in the Book of Giants. So there's just amazing parallels between the this portion of the Book of Enoch and the clay tablets and the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Book of Enoch in general, that tell us that the Book of Enoch is actually the source for the Epic of Gilgamesh and the clay tablets of the Babylonian flood story and the Epic of Gilgamesh, and not Genesis, which is very important because it testifies to the extreme antiquity of the Book of Enoch, because the Book of Enoch would have to date back to a time before the Babylonian flood story tablets, the clay tablets that we're talking about, and that dates back to the time of Avraham. Okay, so this speaks of the great antiquity of our book. Okay, back to chapter 10, in verse 4. And again Yahweh said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert which is in Dudael, and cast him therein. And place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face, that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire, and heal the earth which the angels have corrupted, and proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague, and that all of the children of men may not perish through all the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sins. And this brings us to our next handout. It says at the top, to him ascribe all sins. This has to do with Azazel and the Yom Kippur ceremony. The Yom Kippur ritual, the Yom Kippur temple ritual is perhaps one of the most beautiful prophetic imagery in the temple ceremonies. In this ceremony, the high priest casts lots upon two goats. This is in Leviticus chapter 16. One which is appointed for Yahweh, and the other which is appointed for Azazel. As we read in the Torah, Leviticus 16, 7 through 10, and he shall take the two goats and set them before Yahweh at the door of the tent for meeting, and Aharon shall cast lots upon the two goats, one lot for Yahweh, and the other lot for Azazel. And Aharon shall present the goat upon which the lot fell for Yahweh, and offer him for a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be set alive before Yahweh to make atonement over him, to send him away for Azazel into the wilderness. Does this sound familiar? Okay. The first of these goats represents the first coming of the Messiah as a sin offering, representing the death of the Messiah. This is, by the way, real clear in the book of Hebrews, and we'll cover this when we do our Through the Book of Hebrews study. Then the high priest, which is representing the resurrected Messiah, enters the Holy of Holies, which represents the heavenly Holy of Holies, and sprinkles the blood 7 times on the altar, representing the opening of the 7 seals. When the high priest returns from the Holy of Holies, representing the return of the Messiah, then we read in Leviticus 16, verses 21 through 22, and Aharon shall lay both hands upon the head of the live goat, that would be the goat that was appointed for Azazel, and confess over him all the iniquities of the children of Israel. This is why 1 Enoch 10:8 says, ascribe to him all sins, and all their transgressions, even all their sins, and he shall put them upon the head of the goat, and shall send him away by the hand of an appointed man into the wilderness. And the goat shall bear upon him all their iniquities into a land which is cut off, and he shall let go the goat in the wilderness. Now, the Torah here seems to assume that people already know who Azazel is, because they at that time had the Book of Enoch. And of course, the Azazel in the Book of Enoch ceremony represents Azazel. It's real easy. The high priest places all the sins of Israel upon him. That's just like we read in the book of Enoch, chapter 10, verse 8. And likewise is sent away into the wilderness, as we read in 1 Enoch chapter 10, verses 4 through 5. And again, Yahweh said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide forever, and cover his face, that he may not see light. This parallels also the fate of Hasatan, as we read in Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3. And I saw another angel that descended from heaven, who had the key of the abyss and a great chain in his hand, and he seized the dragon, the old serpent, who is the Akelkartza and Hasatan, and he bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the abyss, closed and sealed the top over him, so that he would not seduce all the nations anymore. After these things, he must release him for a short time. That's Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 through 3. Okay, so this is this is very important, because the Azazel plays a very important part not only in the Yom Kippur ceremony, but then also in last days biblical prophecy. We get to chapter 10, verse 9 now, and we read, and to Gavriel said Yahweh, proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication, and the children of watchers from among men, and cause them to go forth, send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in a war of destruction, and length of days shall they not have. And no request that they, i.e. their fathers, make of you shall be granted unto the fathers on their behalf, for they hope to live an eternal life, and that each one of them will live 500 years. So this is the fate of the giants. And Yahweh said unto Michael, go make known to Shemichazah and his associates who have united themselves, and when their sons shall die, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valley of the earth, till the great day of the judgment of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. In those days they shall be led off to the abyss of fire, and the torment and prison in which they shall be confined in forever. And everyone who shall be condemned and destroyed will from henceforth be bound together with them until the destruction of all their generations. At the time of the judgment which I shall judge, they will perish for all generations. And destroy all the spirits and reprobates and the children of the watchers, because they have wronged mankind. And destroy wrong from the face of the earth, and let every evil work and come to an end. Let's pause there. I want to go back to verse 12 before we continue further. Verse 12 talks about him, the Shemichazah and his companions are bound for 70 generations, it says. Now, how long is 70 generations? There have been a number of people discuss what this 70 generations refers to. Is it 20 years? Is it 40 years? Is it 70 years? Well, the answer is that in this case, it actually refers to 70 generations, I believe. And fortunately for us, we can go to Luke chapter 3 and count 70 generations. And that's our next handout. Our next handout says 70 generations from Enoch to the apostasy. And this handout has a quote of 1 Enoch 10:12 at the top, bind them fast for 70 generations. And as you see, if we turn to Luke chapter 3 and to Yeshua's genealogy in the book of Luke chapter 3. And we count 70 generations beginning with Enoch, we find that there are exactly 70 generations from Enoch to Yeshua. Now that's very interesting because of what Hegesippus says, Hegesippus the Nazarene says about the great apostasy. He said, "But when the sacred band of emissaries had in various ways closed their lives, and that generation of men to whom it had been vouchsafed to listen to the godlike wisdom with their very own ears had passed away, then did the confederacy of godless error take its rise." That's Hegesippus, who wrote around 185 CE, quoted by Eusebius in Ecclesiastical History, Book 3, Chapter 32. So, according to Hegesippus, the apostasy began in the generation that followed Yeshua. It says, "And that generation of men whom it had been vouchsafed to listen when they had passed away." So in other words, after the same generation as Yeshua and his disciples, that 71st generation, that generation following the 70th generation, is when the apostasy began. Isn't it interesting that the great apostasy began, the great deception began, as Shemi Chazah and his companions were released? At least if we take 1 Enoch 10:12 with Luke chapter 3 quite literally to refer to 70 generations. Okay, returning to the book of Enoch, chapter 10. Excuse me. "And destroy the wrong from the face," verse 16, "and destroy the wrong from the face of the earth, and let every evil work come to an end, and let the plant of righteousness and truth appear, and it shall prove a blessing. The works of righteousness and truth shall be planted in truth by joy forevermore." This is talking about Noah. "And then shall all the righteous escape, and shall live till they beget thousands, and all the days of your youth and your old age shall be complete in shalom." There's a parallel here, though, prophetically, between the last days and the judgment at the time of Noah. "And then shall the whole earth be tilled in righteousness, and shall be planted with trees and full of blessing. And all trees shall be planted on it, and they shall plant vines on it, and the vine which they plant therein shall yield wine in abundance. And as for all the seed which is sown thereon, each measure of it shall bear 1,000, and each measure of olive shall yield 10 presses of oil. And cleanse you the earth from all oppression, and from all unrighteousness, and from all sin, and from all godlessness, and all the uncleanness that is wrought upon the earth, destroy off the earth. And all the children of men shall become righteous, and all nations shall offer adoration, and shall praise me, and all shall worship me. And the earth shall be cleansed from all defilement, and from all in, and from all punishment, and from all torment, and I will never again send them upon it from generation to generation forever." Chapter 11, verse 1, "And then I will open the store chambers of blessing which are in heaven, and so as to send them down upon the earth over the work and the labor of the children of men. And the truth and shalom shall be associated together throughout all the days of the world, and throughout all the generations of men." Chapter 12, verse 1. Before these things, okay, so before the flood, backing up, before these things, before the judgment, before the message came up, before chapter 9, before the judgment came down, before the angels came to Yahweh and said, "What are we going to do about it?" And before all that happened, we're flashing back now, chapter 12, verse 1. Before these things, Enoch was hidden. And we talked about that in lesson 1, about what the book of Jasher says about that, his times when he went into hiding. And no one of the children of men knew where he was hidden, and where he abode, and what had become of him. And his activities had to do with the watchers, and his days were with the set apart ones. And I, Enoch, was blessing Yahweh of majesty and the King of the ages. And lo, the angels called me, Enoch the scribe, and said to me, Enoch, you scribe of righteousness, go declare to the watchers of heaven, who have left the high heaven, the set apart eternal place, and have defiled themselves with women, and have done as the children of earth do, and have taken unto themselves wives. You have wrought a great destruction upon the earth, and you shall have no shalom, nor forgiveness of sin. And inasmuch as they delight themselves in their children, the murder of their beloved ones shall they see, and over the destruction of their children shall they lament, and they shall make supplication unto eternity, but mercy and shalom shall you not attain. So, Enoch this is, by the way, begins a wonderful section that teaches us a lot about spiritual warfare and what our place is, both in regards to the angels and the fallen angels and the demonic realm. Okay, Enoch is being sent by the angels to go tell the fallen angels that they've messed up, to deliver the judgment to them. That's what a high place Enoch, a man, has in Elohim's system. And Enoch went to Azazel in chapter 13, verse 1. Enoch went and said to Azazel, can you imagine going to a fallen angel with a message from the watchers, from the angels that didn't fall, to go deliver them a message of judgment? Well, isn't that amazing? To be able to have that kind of boldness and to be in that kind of position with Yahweh. And we're intended to be. That's where we're intended to be, in that kind of boldness, where we confront the fallen angels and the demonic with that kind of authority and power and respect that we could do that. And Enoch went and said to Azazel, you shall have no shalom. A severe sentence has gone forth against you, to put you in bonds, and you shall not have toleration, nor request granted to you, because of the unrighteousness which you have taught, and because of all the works of godlessness and unrighteousness and sin which you have shown to men. And I went and spoke to them all together, and they were all afraid, and fear and trembling seized them. And they brought me to draw up a petition for them, that they might find forgiveness, and to read their petition in the presence of Yahweh of heaven. So the fallen angels are so scared and intimidated and have such high regard for Enoch that they, will you please go intercede on our behalf? So here it's a topsy-turvy. We think of angels interceding for man before the throne, which is what we do see in chapter 9. And in fact, Enoch is in such a place in his spiritual walk, in such a place in his relationship with Yahweh, that fallen angels are asking him to intercede for them before Yahweh. They can't do it themselves. They can't come to the throne themselves because they are in such a fallen state. Verse 4, and they brought me to draw up a petition for them, that they might find forgiveness, and to read their petition in the presence of Yahweh of heaven. And from thenceforth they could not speak with him, nor lift up their eyes to heaven for shame, for their sins for which they had been condemned. They had too much shame to go to Yahweh themselves. So they asked Enoch to go for them. And I wrote out their petition in the prayer in regard to their spirits and their deeds individually, and with regard to the requests concerning all their souls, that they should have forgiveness and length. And I went off and sat down at the waters of Dan. Dan is, of course, it wasn't Dan then, because the land of Dan is named after the tribe of Dan, but Dan also means judge or judgment. In the land of Dan, in the land of judgment, this is implying that the land of Dan was the land of Dan, became the land of Dan, because it was the place of this judgment. To the south of the west of Harmon, I read their petition of their request till I fell asleep. And behold, a dream came to me, and visions fell down upon me, until I lifted my eyelids towards the gates of the palace of heaven, and I saw a vision of the wrath of chastisement, and a voice came to me, and it said, Speak to the sons of heaven, and reprimand them. And when I wakened, I came unto them, and they were all assembled together, weeping in Abel Maya, which is between Lebanon and Sinir, and their faces were covered. And I recounted before them all the visions which I had seen in sleep. And I began to speak the words of truth and visions of reprimand the heavenly watchers. So he began to rebuke them and tell them a negative judgment. Chapter 14, verse 1. The book of the words of truth and of the reprimand of the eternal watchers, in accordance with the command of the great set apart one, commanded in the dream which I dreamed. Now we flash back again, because in chapter 13 he's already delivered, he's reprimanded them. But now in chapter 14 it's going to tell us and back up and tell us what that dream was, and more about that dream and more about that reprimand. So we're now in chapter 14. Excuse me. Chapter 14. The book of the words of truth and the reprimand of the eternal watchers, in accordance with the command of the great set apart one, commanded in the dream which I dreamed. I saw in my sleep what I will now say with the tongue of flesh and with the breath of my mouth, which the great one has given to men to converse wherewith and understand with the heart. As he was created and given to man, he has created and given to man the power of understanding and the word of knowledge. So he has created me to reprimand the watchers, the children of heaven. In other words, Elohim originally created man with the intent that man would reprimand, would be over the angels. By the way, as we studied earlier in our lessons, we found that Azazel and Shemichazah rebelled originally because they didn't like that. They didn't like the idea that man was placed above the angels, and they said, oh, you know, don't you know he's going to sin? And Elohim says, well, you're going to sin worse. Well, let me show you. And he sends them down to earth, and when they come down to the earth, they then are tempted by the women, and they take physical form, and they sin in multiple ways, worse than man. Okay, so now then they've learned their lesson, if you will. Maybe they haven't really learned their lesson, because it's more like they got caught. They then turn and they come back to man, and they acknowledge man's place over them, because they ask Enoch to intercede for them. And he has created and given man the power of understanding, the word of knowledge, so that he created me to reprimand the watchers, the children of heaven. That's the authority that we have over the demonic realm, if we have that spiritual walk where we are prepared to take it, as Enoch did. I wrote out your petition, and in my vision it appeared to me that your petition will not be granted unto you throughout all the days of eternity, and that judgment has been finally passed upon you and decreed against you. And from henceforth you shall not ascend into heaven unto all eternity, and in the bonds of the earth the judgment has gone forth to bind you for all the days of the world, and that previously you shall see the destruction of your beloved ones, and all their sons and their possessions of your beloved ones shall have no heirs to them, and they shall fall before you by the sword of destruction. Because your petition on their behalf shall not be granted, nor yet on your own, even though your petition and ask and speak all the words, even though you petition, and ask and speak all the words contained in the writing which I have written, and the vision was shown to me thus. Now we're not going to go any further because this then goes into Enoch's first journey. However, I want to address here, we have time, let me check the time here. No, we really don't have time to get into this here because it's too much. So in our next lesson, we're going to pick up with the, we're going to pick back up a little bit more over this judgment that's taken place, Enoch's mediation for the fallen angels, and the punishments. We're going to review the punishments of the fallen angels, and we're going to do a little bit more detail because we're going to go into a midrash that talks about some of these things in the rabbinic literature. And then we're going to continue into, we're going to start Enoch's first journey, beginning in chapter 14, verse 13. No, sorry, verse 8. So before we close, I want to remind you to please remember to support these teachings with your tithes and your free will offerings. These are teachings that you really can't get anywhere else. This is not the sort of thing that you get from the churches or the rabbinic synagogues. Nobody like that is going to go through and take you line by line through the book of Enoch, bring it all together with the Ketuvim Netzarim, or the writings of the Nazarenes, the so-called New Testament, bring it together with the Zohar and the rabbinic literature, and the other apocryphal writings that are of significance, and really teach through the book of Enoch and what it really means for us. That's not something that you can find a lot of out there. We have a very unique ministry in trying to bring these kinds of things to you and this kind of teaching to you. But we have a fairly small audience, and we need that audience to step up to the plate and be the ones that support this work, because it is you who make these teachings possible. It takes a lot of time and effort so I hope that you will strongly consider supporting this work with your tithes and offerings. You can do that by going to NazareneJudaism.com or to NazareneSpace.com and clicking on the PayPal box in the either upper right or upper left hand corner. And you can donate that way electronically, and those donations reach us almost instantly. Or if you aren't able to do that via the internet, you can send check or money order to Nazarene Judaism, P.O. Box 471, Hurst, Texas 76053. Just make it out to Nazarene Judaism and mail it to Nazarene Judaism, P.O. Box 471, Hurst, Texas 76053. If you don't support these studies, no one will. They're not being supported by some big denominations out there, or by some major Jewish groups out there, or anything. Nothing like that. It's just you. So if you want these studies to continue, you need to be the one to step up to the plate and help make it happen. All right? So with that, I hope that you'll continue with us in our next lesson, starting in our lesson 4, starting in 1 Enoch chapter 14, verse 8. Okay? So until then, shalom.